Find the value of sine alpha and the length of arc of the sector. Label points B, C, D, and E. Let A be the radius of the circle. It implies that line OC equals R-1 and line OB equals to line OD, which equals to R. R is the radius of the circle whose sector BODE is given. From triangle BOC. Use cosine rule. We obtained an equation for the square of line OB as shown on the screen. Substitute values. We have that the square of R equals the sum of the square of 5 and the square of R minus 1 minus 10 times the product of R minus 1 and cosine alpha. Expand brackets. The square of R equals the sum of 25 and the square of R minus 2 times R plus 1 minus 10 times the product of R minus 1 and cosine alpha. Combine like terms and make cosine alpha the subject of the formula. We have that cosine alpha equals 26 minus 2 times R, all divided by 10 times R minus 1, which equals 13 minus R, all divided by 5 times R minus 1. We call it equation 1. Consider triangle DCO. Angle DCO equals 180 degrees minus alpha. It is because the sum of angles in a straight line equals 180 degrees. Use cosine rule. The square of line OD equals the sum of the square of line CD and the square of line OC minus 2 times the product of line CD and line OC times cosine 180 degrees minus alpha. Substitute values and we have that the square of R equals the sum of the square of 3 and the square of R minus 1 minus 6 times the product of R minus 1 and cosine 180 degrees minus alpha. Expand brackets. The square of R equals the sum of 9 and the square of R minus 2 times R plus 1 minus 6 times the product of R minus 1 and cosine 180 degrees minus alpha. Combine like terms, simplify and we have that 6 times the product of R minus 1 and cosine 180 degrees minus alpha equals 10 minus 2 times R. Make cosine 180 degrees minus alpha the subject of the formula. Cosine 180 degrees minus alpha equals 2 times 5 minus R, all divided by 6 times R minus 1. Which equals 5 minus R, all divided by 3 times R minus 1. This implies that cosine 180 degrees minus alpha equals 5 minus R, all divided by the product of 3 and R minus 1. We call it equation Q. But by trigonometric identity, cosine 180 degrees minus alpha equals negative cosine alpha. Substitute into equation Q. Cosine 180 degrees minus alpha equals 5 minus R, divided by the product of 3 and R minus 1, which equals negative cosine alpha. Multiply this equation by negative 1, as shown on the screen. We obtain that R minus 5 divided by the product of 3 and R minus 1 equals cosine alpha. We call it equation 2. Equate equation 1 and equation 2. This implies that 13 minus r, all divided by the product of 5 and r minus 1 equals r minus 5, all divided by the product of 3 and r minus 1. Cross-multiply and simplify. We obtained an equation as shown on the screen. Hence, the product of 3 and 13 minus r equals the product of 5 and r minus 5. Open brackets. (39 minus 3 times r equals 5 times r minus 25). Combine like terms. It signify that the sum of 39 and 25 equals 8 times r. We have that 64 equals to 8 times r. Divide the equation by 8. r equals 64 divided by 8, which equals 8 units. Solution to question 1. Substitute the value of r into equation 1. It follows that cosine alpha equals 13 minus r, all divided by the product of 5 and r minus 1, which equals to 1 divided by 7. After simplification of substituted values, it implies that cosine alpha equals to 1 divided by 7. We call it equation y. By trigonometric identity, sine alpha equals the square root of 1 minus the square of cosine alpha. Substitute value of cosine alpha obtained into this equation. Therefore, sine alpha equals the square root of 1 minus the square of 1 divided by 7, which equals the product of 4 and the square root of 3, all divided by 7. After simplification of substituted values. Solution to question 2. Let angle BOD be equals to theta. Triangle BOD is an equilateral triangle. Since line OB equals line OD, which equals r, and line BD equals to 8 units. Therefore, the length of arc of sector BODE equals 2 times the product of pi and theta times r, all divided by 360 degrees, which equals 2 times pi times the product of 60 degrees and 8, all divided by 360 degrees. The result is equals the product of 8 and pi, all divided by 3 in units. After simplification of substituted values. After simplification of substituted values. After simplification of substituted values.